So it's a really interesting, very cool tool. I read about it for the first time in, I think, about September, and then again in October. And I thought, that's just what I need, and I really want to go and try this out. And I started watching all the very cool videos made by Seth and the AI team from Microsoft. And I really wanted to try it out. So thank you for joining me on looking into this. Did we get any good answers in the chat set? Otherwise, I'm going to ask in a moment to be allowed to share the screen.
No, we haven't received anything, but I just need to mention, if you have any question, just shout out in the chat. And I don't know, Emilie, is your okay if people can ask questions middle of your presentation, or we can keep all of them in end of the session? Which is your preferences?
So I think it makes it dynamic if people ask. Then there might be questions where I'll say, okay, I'll get to that at the end, or we're doing that in a bit. But do ask questions. It makes it more fun and interactive, because you never know what the what we call it, the demo session gods are gonna do. I did pre-record some of it, but I have it live also in my browser, so hopefully I can show it to you live. But otherwise, I also did record videos to make sure. So I've got at least two who's already tried OpenAI ChatGPT prompting for personal use. Okay, yeah. And some who's used Azure OpenAI, Cognitive Search, but not much Azure ML Studio. Okay. So I wonder if that's the level of everybody. Hi from Belgium. Very cool. Okay, you're just getting started. All right. And Said, could you make it possible for me to share my screen?
Yes. Okay, just a second.
And if people otherwise have anything that they would like me to be aware of, do just write it in the chat. Also, one thing I would like to know is what would you like to use machine learning prompt flow for? Do you already have some use cases in mind, something that you've thought of that would be really cool?
Emilie, can you please check it now, right now, if you can share your screen?
Now I can. Let's see.
Amazing.
And I'm going to just choose the entire screen. And we don't have any sound, so this should be all right. Can you see my screen?
Yes. And before you start, just need to mention too, at the end of the session, if someone has a question, we can open the mic and they can ask questions easily.
All right, and we've got one, Thomas, Joshua, using API Gateway to create some prompt flow connectors. All right, very cool. So just to make it a bit more comprehensive and get a bit of a structure, I'm gonna start out with the slides, and that's just to get an overview, and then we're gonna jump into the demo. So originally in the session, we mentioned what we're going to do is to look at generative AI with prompt flow in Azure Machine Learning Service. What I really want to focus on is getting started. So you'll notice that if you find some of the Microsoft videos from like Seth, then there is at least 5 on this subject. And so what we can cover today is pretty much what he covers in the first 2 without it getting too much. So we're starting out with looking into what is it, what can we use it for, how can we create and manage the generative models within prompt flow. And then we're going to try out if we can maybe do some web classification, ask questions to Wikipedia, and then do some Q&A on our own data. If we have time for comparison, we can see what does it look like if we do instead Q&A on our own data within OpenAI service, so we get an idea of what one side can offer compared to another. So that's what I'm going to ensure that we get through today. So on top of this, what you also notice is that when I at least open both my OpenAI service in Azure, but also my AI search, then I keep getting the option to open it in the Azure AI platform. And you'll see that there are many of the same features, and there are many things that are sort of overlapping. So this idea of having access to thousands of LLM models, both from OpenAI, but also from Meta and Hugging Face, well, we have that in machine learning service 2. And what we're going to see is, of course, the opportunity to have data grounding with RAG, or retrieve augmented generation. So meaning that we can actually go in and use an embedding model and either a fairness index or a vector index in order to figure out, or vector model, to figure out when we ask this question, where can we find this information, and use our own data to actually give answers back as part of our prompt flow. Then we also have the opportunity to both work with the prompt engineering, and we have the ability to do an evaluation looking at, okay, well, how accurate or how well is our prompt flow actually doing before we start deploying it. And this could be deploying it to use the import for either a app like it was just mentioned in the chat, or it could also be for Power Automate. Of course, there is also the possibility of using the built-in safety and responsible AI. This could be a whole session on its own. And you have the continuous monitoring. So all of this is also in the machine learning service. So what we get with the model catalog is, what we're going to see today is the option to use the OpenAI models. So today I'm going to use a GPT-3.5, and I'm going to use a Ada model for the embeddings. With time, we could also start using Whisper, we can use DALL-E, we can use Llama, and many other very, very cool models, both to do a fine-tuning. We can use them with our own data, and we can use them in the prompt flow. So this is quite extensive, how much we can build and do in a short time, and how many other people's knowledge we can actually build upon. So I'm quite excited about that. Then now we also have the general availability of vector search in Azure AI Search. You need to create the AI search service, similar to the cognitive search that we created in the past. You can also get a smaller, easier version that you can use within OpenAI's service. If we have time, I'll show you that in the end. But what we need it for is to actually create the indexing of our different documents. It can, in principle, both do images, audible, videograph, and documents, although I would recommend that you start probably with PDFs and then move from there perhaps to then unstructured databases or databases and this kind of data, because it gets harder. So this is the easiest, second, third, and so on. So some of them are simply easier to do than others. You can also use vector or hybrid search, meaning that you can both have a vector index and vector model, and then you can combine it with having keyword search. So this creates a hybrid search in order to have the best possible of both worlds, so that both has an understanding of which subjects are or words are very close to each other, but that you can also use keywords to find the correct document. You can use the Azure OpenAI for embeddings, or you can bring your own. At a later stage, something that I've found very interesting to see is that using just two different embedding models can actually give you quite different results when it comes to your vectors. And it's very cool that in prompt flow there is also the option to actually do this cosine comparison to figure out how is it looking in one embedding model compared to another. And we're going to use an Ada today. We're not going to change that, but this has been something I really have been thinking about the last week, that just changing your embedding model can make a huge difference for how well your search via vector search works. It's already integrated in Azure, of course, and you have the possibility of doing replication and partitioning, and there are several built-in retrieval plugins, and you'll also see that there are connectors already created. So we have this access to thousands of LLMs from OpenAI, Beta, Hugging Face, and so forth. Now we can even work on our prompt engineering. We get the possibility to evaluate, and we can do continuous monitoring, and we have the purpose-built AI infrastructure for this. So it's a bit of a change from how I perhaps worked with machine learning service in the past, where it would traditionally be for machine learning engineers and data scientists, and they would be focusing on doing ML ops. To now you have the idea of LLM ops, where we don't just have machine learning engineers, but we might also be working together with app developers in order to use the flow and the models in the end out in it could be a chatbot, it could be an app, it could be a website, and so forth. Now, in the past, we focused maybe on doing models, data, environments, and the features. And now we look at the LLM models that are the ground models that we focus on. We also think about, okay, how can we create these into agents? This could be using by using LangChain or other plugins. We think about how can we use prompts to improve the output that we get. And also using other APIs to get the information that we want to use together with the LLMs. So this could also be in order to make the LLMs kind of multimodal. Let's say that we would like the LLM to also understand a picture, then we might be using, or it could be documents, then we might be using the API call over to document intelligence or to custom vision or so forth in order to do this. Then in the past, when we looked at the metrics and evaluation, we might be focusing on accuracy. Whereas now there might be many more things to consider than accuracy. We might also need to look at the fairness, the groundedness, the relevance, the coherence, and so forth. And in the past, we would be building many of the ML models from scratch, or we would just have maybe a template, maybe we would have a notebook that we were working from. But now we're much more orientated, at least when we're looking at the prompt flow, towards the pre-built models from either OpenAI or it could be Llama from Meta or so forth. And then how can we either help improve what we get out with prompt engineering, or by embedding better information, or by fine-tuning. So it's become a bit of a different process than what I've been used to, at least. But what is really amazing in Azure Machine Learning Service is that you have the private access and you have controls. So you can use this securely for even enterprise customers, which could be a bit of a challenge if you were working with open source models directly from GitHub. Then we have the prompt engineering. We have the possibility of doing CI/CD. We can also iterate on our experiments, and we have the possibility of creating versioning and reproducibility. You'll also see that once you've actually created a finished prompt flow, what you end up having is a YAML file that you can turn into a pipeline. So what you do is that you start up in your design development, you develop a flow based on a prompt, and then you want to extend its capabilities. You try it and you see how it goes. I can say that I've done that a lot of times lately, debugging, running, and evaluating what's going on. And I really recommend what it says here, do it with small data. Seen several examples where people have started with very large amounts of data, and it just makes the work even harder from there. So start with the small data that actually fit the business case, the use case that you have very specifically. That makes the further development much easier. So not too much, and build on it. And then, well, if you're satisfied, that's great. Then you can move on down here to evaluation and refinement. Figuring out against a larger data set if the different matrix of quality, relevance, and safety are as you'd like them to be. And then if you're satisfied, you can go further on to optimizing the flow and putting it into production, so deploying it and starting to use the endpoint either for chatbot application or so forth. If you're not satisfied, I can say that has happened many times to me, then you can go back and you can modify the flow and play around with it and sort of go back and forth until you are at the point that you'd like to be. So it does give you a streamlined prompt engineering projects. It looks a bit like what we had in the past in Azure Machine Learning Designer. The benefit being that you both have code, but you also have a visual overview, And in the end, you can get this full code overview that you can use in a YAML file and have running in a pipeline. So the great benefits here is that you create AI workflows that connect to various language models. It's fairly easy to make the connectors. I'm going to show you in a bit. You can also use other APIs to call functions, call in additional information and data. You can use different data sources to ground your LLMs on your own data. This can be it can be data that's uploaded to a data store in your machine learning service. It can be data in a Cosmos DB. It can also be data that has been put in a blob storage. So these are just some of the examples of how you can do it. And then from there, we can construct our initial flow, tune it, evaluate it, test it, and work with it. And try to evaluate the quality. I'm going to show you one way of evaluating it, but of course there are many, and this in a non-answering could also be a session. There is a rich set of pre-built metrics in here, and there is also feedback on the safety of the system. So you get a lot of insights. It's quite transparent, and it's fairly easy to try different kind of prompt tuning and then do a comparison of the different runs that you've been doing. So we develop the workflows, we can connect them to a lot of different tools. We can test and evaluate, we can tune, we can compare, and we can deploy. Great. Then when it comes to the authoring, you can both use construct a flow from pre-built tools. I would definitely recommend starting here. It gives you a very good framework to work with before you start doing your own custom code. It does support custom code, and we'll see that several times, that you have similar to what you had in Designer in Azure Machine Learning Service, that you can go in these boxes and you can add and you can change the code. We can also do that during the demo, but you start off well if you start with the pre-built tools and templates. Then you can clone from the samples. Highly recommend also doing that and trying that out first before you do your own. In addition to this, there are also quite a few GitHub repos that you can go in and try out. Although I have to say, getting started with that takes more time than getting started with the samples. Good. Then when it comes to the connections, I'm going to show you how to make them. So the first and most obvious connections that we are going to make is, of course, that we need to use some LLMs. It is very easy to make a connection to the OpenAI service, but you can also just as well connect to the normal OpenAI if you have access to the models and endpoints. Like, so you have a developer access, then you could also do that. In addition to that, you have the possibility of using something like Azure Translator. You have the possibility of using a vector database lookup. You can use vector indexes. You can use embeddings. So I'm, as I mentioned, using a ADA model from OpenAI service as my embedding model, but you could use something else also. So we have all these connections that are built in, very similar to what we know from the Power Platform. So it's quite easy to use. And then in addition, you can create your own connection with Python tools. So if I had to extend this with another session, I would say the next very interesting thing to connect it with would be LangChain. That is something that I would like to extend this session with. Then when it comes to the variants, then we can create these dynamic prompts, and we can use external data. And we can also, within the different prompt boxes, give it a few samples. I have one example where I'm giving it a fairly long prompt. We have also with the first example with the web classification, in that prompt, it also gets quite a few examples so that it can learn from there. But you can edit this and tune the way you want it. Let's say you've created one flow that works really well for a marketing assistant, and now you want to change it and you want to give it examples from being maybe a sales representative. Then you could go in here and change the prompt that has been put in. And as mentioned, you can then evaluate them so that you can see, okay, which of them works the best. Where does it have problems answering specific questions or specific subjects? And you can extend to make it better and better. then you can compare them. So you can have your different runs. You can then see the status. You can see the category that it looked on and the evidence. And then you can compare the accuracy out here on the side to see which of them did the best. And then, as I mentioned, you can deploy it, and then you get the endpoint. We'll also see that, and you can use that in a app, or Power Automate, or a website. Good. So that was it for the introduction. It is now in general availability. So you have this one big platform that you can work with. So here, I'm just going to go in very fast and say what is the prerequisites, because some might think that you just go and open Azure Machine Learning Service and then everything is there you need, and that's not the case. So the minimum that you need before you start up here, and this is the very short list. So if I had to say, if you had to go and make some of the more extensive examples that you can find on YouTube, like, and that was also showed at Ignite, where they're doing a Contoso chat on different products and finding all the different customers that they've had, then you need to install a lot more and have many more services up and running. So this is just a very, very bare minimum to get started. We need an Azure Machine Learning service. We also need the OpenAI service or an OpenAI model endpoint and access. We need a cognitive search instant. Optionals are the blob storage and customers DB. And in addition to that, if you want to make this really advanced, you would also need to have Visual Studio Code. You would have to have the extension that is created for PromptFlow. You would need to install several packages, both Content, Python, many others, in order to get the examples on GitHub up and running. If we just want to do a machine learning service, we go into the portal. We create a resource, we search for machine learning, and you'll see very fast you get the machine learning service, and you just choose create, and it's fairly simple. The only thing that might be good is to choose the different services in the same region, but it's not a must. So that's very, very easy. The next is going in and creating the OpenAI on Azure. For most of you working in enterprises, this will be without any rights. You just go in, say create resource, search for OpenAI, choose the first here OpenAI service that you get up, and then you can create a service. Though there might be some of you in specific regions or not connected to a big enterprise customer who have to apply for access. Mostly don't have to, but there might be a few of you who runs into this. So if that happens, an alternative route is to use the normal OpenAI and set up an account there with access to the model's endpoints and keys. Then the OpenAI information that you actually need, and you can't get started without this, is of course to have the endpoint and the key, and that goes for whether you're using OpenAI on Azure or the normal OpenAI portal. So just an example of that. Then from AI or cognitive search, you also need to perhaps create that. Again, you go in, say create a resource, you ask for Azure AI search now. And but if you have an old cognitive search, I think that will work just fine too. At least that's what I've seen. And then of course here you also need to have the base or the URL, and you need to have the keys in order to use it. But that's it for now, and let's jump into the demo. So the first thing that I wanted to show you is how to create the connectors. So when we've got into Azure Machine Learning, you go in and you choose the prompt file on the left side, and you say create to a connector. Now the first that we do need is the OpenAI for the prompt file, and here you choose the provider, and then you select the resource and the name of it, and then of course you insert the key. And then it needs what it calls the base, or sort of the URL of where to find it. I'm going to go into my OpenAI service that I created for this demo and just find its endpoint and where it is located. So sometimes it's up here, and sometimes it's only under the keys and the endpoint. Sometimes it's in both places. But at least I do need this before I can create my connector. So I go back and I insert this, and I tell people what type it is, and it is an Azure. And that's pretty much all I need to save my first connector and get started. Then the next thing I must have is a runtime. And that has to be created or your prompt flow can't run. In order to have a runtime, you have to have a compute. So if you don't have any compute, you need to go in here and create a new one. And once that one's up running, then you go back to your runtime and you say create, give it a name, maybe you give it a description, and then you select in a moment the Azure ML compute instance that you want to have or want to use for your prompt flows. And I recommend using the default environment because most of the packages that you're going to need are installed. If you instead pull some of the GitHub repos with examples for prompt flow to do it in your Visual Studio Code, you will run into spending a bit of time installing all the right libraries and so forth in order to have the right environment. So this is very helpful. It's a lot easier. Is there any questions so far? Otherwise, I'll just continue. And then ready for the...
Emilie, sorry to interrupt you. We have 3 questions right now, but I don't know if you want to answer it right now or we want to give it on end of session. Can I ask them now?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So one question is, will AI Studio work instead of ML Studio?
Could you repeat that?
Will AI Studio work instead of ML Studio?
Oh, you know what? Honestly, the first time I saw it, it was in the AI Studio, and I got really excited and wanted to try it out. And then when I started to try to make my connectors to the services I had, I ran into a bit of trouble. So when I do it over in my in my AI Studio, I have to create new models or make new deployments. And that makes it a little harder to connect to the work that I've already done, if that makes sense. So you can do it, but it's not as easy to build on the services, the data, and the work you might already have been doing in Azure. So that was the one flaw I found in AI Studio. But if you're starting from scratch and there isn't anything to connect to anyways, it's just as good to start over there.
Okay. There is another question. How does the Azure Machine Learning Prompt Flow handle the data pre-processing and feature engineering?
Yeah. How does it handle the pre-processing and the feature engineering? So most of this is we'll see in a moment that we have a few things that we can tweak, but most of it, of course, is what has already been done with the model that we're using. And the only sort of career features that we get to tweak, except input that we do, is the same things as we would have in OpenAI service. So, we have the randomness, we've got the temperature, we can decide these tokens in and out. But when we're using the prompt flow, that is really how we decide what direction we want to move the model that we are working with, if that makes sense.
Okay. And the last question so far, are LangChain and all dependencies installed already in the default environment? I think it's a good question.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not, but it's very doable to do a pip install in the Python boxes that you have in the prompt flow, and then start working with LangChain or making the connection. So it's not there as default.
Amazing. Okay, so we don't have more questions. Please continue.
So the first one that I wanted to get us through was the web classification. This is the easiest one to start with and good for giving you an understanding if you haven't tried it before. And you'll find it on the creator palm on the different samples. So in and you clone it, and then you are pretty much ready to go. So we clone it, it takes one moment, and then it's up and running in our prompt flow. And then we already start having an overview, which is much easier than if we had to start Once you've done it a few times, you can start from scratch. Here we can see that we have some boxes that's already put in. We've already got our LLM box, we've already got a prompt box, we already have some Python boxes. Then it also has decided on one URL to start with from Microsoft. I'm going to change it and then see what else it is. And then for the outputs, it's going to try to get the evidence of it. And then we have the Python fetch content. And here you can actually see that it runs some packages that we might been working with. So it's actually using Beautiful Soup in order to scrape the information from the URL and input it here. So it becomes an input URL. And then after that, in order to get understanding of it, we do a summarization. In order to do the summarization, we need to press the connection and find the model that we already have connected to that we do the summarization. So I will be forced to do that before I can run the flow. And then you can see that there are even more that we can change. So here I just choose my from flow demo. That is the name of the connection that I created to my OpenAI service on Azure. Now it has a low temperature and it has max tokens of 100.8 because we wanted to make up a lot of, we don't want it to be creative, we want it to be very to the point, but maybe I wanted to take in a bit more information in order to get better answers. So I'm increasing the number of and then down here you can see all the few shot examples that has already been given to it for understanding. And these, of course, we could change. It was a different kind of category that we wanted to classify web pages towards. Then here comes the classification part. Again, we're using an LLM. We're using the same deployment we had before. It's a GPT-3.5 in Azure. And I think maybe I need to adjust the max tokens. I set them at 400 here, but that could also be a bit more now. Then it summarizes, and then it converts into a dictionary telling me very precisely what is it for a URL that I put in. So this is the first very, very simple example. Now, I would like it to try to read this PDF from the paper teaching small language models how to reason. So I'm going to try to first input that as the value instead and see how it does. So we're going to input that, we're going to save it, and then we're going to try to run. And now you can see it is thinking through all of the different boxes and steps. And you also hear of the prepared examples already, where we have an academic text on the visual chat GPT. We had an example of text about music from Spotify and a URL with some text about sports. So you can see that it's already been giving a few examples. So a bit of few shot learning. And get out none in both in the category, but when it looks in the end, I have the category PDF, but evidence both. And that's a little bit surprising because I thought it would recognize this as academic. But then if I go in and I look a bit at what it outputted from the PDF, I can see that it looks a little funny. And this is the reason why it can't figure out that the input is actually academic. So I'm going, and you can see that down here, it's as if what it can pull out from this PDF in the browser is not as easy to read as maybe if I chose a web page. So it does figure out that it's a PDF. It figures out that there are some matrices in there, but it doesn't get that it is academic. So I'm going to try to change that and put in a web that describes the same articles, also the Orca 2, and see if it then figures it out. So here I found another web page for Orca 2, teaching small language models how to reason. I'm going to take that URL instead and then see how it does. So we're going to copy it, put it in, run it one more time. And another way also to improve the classification that it comes out with would of course be to change the few shot examples that we have given so that it perhaps fit better to the web classification that we would like it to come out with. So here we are. We adjust it. Keep the temperature the way it is. And see how it does on the accuracy. Increase also the tokens of the output. And we've got it running here. So I think it's fairly fast at running the prompt flows, but as you can see, it's not instant. It does take a little bit of time. I'm sure that if I was using a GPT-4, it would be even faster, but everything improves with time. So I paused it, got the final answer now. And the duration, well, it's not that right, but now it figured out that it was academic and there was evidence of several types. So this is just an example of changing it slightly. But we don't have that long, so we're going to jump straight on to how do we do it with asking questions to Wikipedia. This is a very, very good start before jumping on to asking questions to your own data. So here we have chat with Wikipedia, and we can go in and clone that and see if it can answer questions about either machine learning or neural networks. So let's jump in. And the first question that I tried to ask it was, who is the CEO of OpenAI? And here it could give me a good answer for it being Sam Altman. And the next might be, what is the difference between, I know that it's gonna get a hard time, but it could be something like a lane chain and a semantic kernel. Let's see if we can answer that. So the difference from before is that now the pane on the right side is a chat in an output. So we're working directly with the prompt flow and seeing live how it is working and what we're getting in and out. Now here, this it could not answer, so let's try something else. And so I asked it, what is a neural network? And of course, in this instance, it is actually connected to Wikipedia, and the embeddings and the information is coming from Wikipedia. And that should make it possible to give also a reference to the web page or Wikipedia page where the information has been found. So that is what is slightly different here. And here we see that it actually comes back with both a correct and fairly long answer. So a neural network is a computational model inspired by the structure and function of the brain. And I can't read all of it, but you can see it gives a good long answer. And here we get the source. And this is, of course, the special thing about using these prompt files, that we can embed information from both online sources, but also our own data and our own databases. So now, one of the things that's quite important before we actually start deploying is that we evaluate our model. And we have this little button up to the right where we can go in and we can evaluate. And then, of course, we have to ask it to look at some of the data. So it looks at one of the runtime data. And then in addition, we can add data that we know is correct, that it can compare to. And then we can choose the kind of evaluation it should do. I choose classification as the first because it's a, I choose to have a accuracy evaluation because it's a classification prompt flow that we've been running, so that would be fitting. But there is actually many other kinds of evaluations. There are also similarity, cosin, and so forth. That can be very helpful even to figure out how well is your embedding model doing. And we then add our data URL and the top 5 row and we can add that's then from the runs that we've been doing. And then we can add some data that we know is correct to have it compared to for evaluation. And we can upload that from our own laptop. And I had some data that was correct for the web classification. And so I've uploaded that, and now we are ready to run our evaluation. Oh, and it gave me a little bit of challenges. Let's see. Oh, of course, I have to tell it what is the ground truth of the, and that is, of course, the data that I have inputted for the category that it's predicting. And then the prediction came from the run category that had been done with the prompt flow. And it takes a little bit of time. So I paused it so that it will go faster. We can actually go through all of this in an hour. But then we get the details, and here you can see we get a nice visual overview. And when we look at it here, we can also visualize the output on the runs. And the good thing about doing this is that we get a straight over overview of what outputs from ground truth and predictions, what inputs from the ground truth and what predictions were correct. And we also get an overall status of the accuracy. So with this, we can see easily, is there specific categories or specific areas where it has challenges that we need to address or work with. Then let's move on to the next, which is now that we have evaluated it and we want to deploy it, then we also just same way as in Azure Machine Learning Service, we can go in here and we can just check everything is okay. And then when we've done that, we can go up and press deploy and give the endpoint a name so that we can find it when we need to use it for whatever it might be, a app or web service. So we give it the name, of course, of web classification. And we choose the virtual machine that makes it possible to deploy it. And once we've done that, we're pretty much ready to just check all the information and create. It takes a little bit of time before it's done with deploying. You see now it is in progress, so I paused it so you wouldn't have to wait. And then I think now it is ready and we can use the endpoint. So it is just as easy as when you were training machine learning models in the past in Machine Learning Studio and deploying them for use, whether it was for forecasting or classifications or predictions and so forth. It is the same idea. And of course, here is no live traffic, but you can see the Swagger URI and the REST endpoint here so that you can copy it and start using it. So we've covered that part. Now, of course, what I was most excited about was chatting with my own data. I also have to say that that did take me a bit longer to get straight. I did start out with their sample, and I'm going to start out showing you this sample. I'll jump over and show you one on my own data. So the first here on the sample, I'm asking what is Azure. We're hoping you can answer that. Again, I have to make sure that I've got a connection to my ADA model for embeddings. We're still inputting the input questions, same as we saw before. We've got a string for the fairness index that we are using to help us index the data that we want to ask questions to. And then it looks up the search and gives it onto the output. And then that needs to give a full answer of the output with context. And it does that together with the OpenAI model. So I'll go up here and I'll change it maybe to what is Azure Machine Learning Service. And then let's save and run and see if it can give us a good answer to that. And let's see. And do we have any questions in the meantime?
Yes, we have one. And Thomas asked, do you like use the VS Code version of the prompt flow or prefer the portal? Guessing the later remains more fully featured right now.
I think he's spot on with that. I wanted to also show prompt flow in VS Code that we would not have covered that in an hour. Not all of this together. So maybe I'll do a later session on it. I definitely think that once this really has to develop into full applications and working with LLM ops, then that's the way to go. But for now, if you're just getting started with it and you're going to do this for the first time, I highly recommend going in and using prompt flows within Azure Machine Learning Service. Now we can see that I finally came back with an answer. So here we have what is question, what is machine learning service? And it gives us a long answer that looks like part of an article on Microsoft's web page where it says it's a cloud service, accelerating and managing machine learning projects lifecycle. It is for professional data scientists, engineers, and so forth. You can even get a free trial. So it seems like it has decided to pull information from the web page, and you can also see that there is a further link to Microsoft Learn. So it could definitely answer this. Good, but let's say that I want to now do it on my own data. And I think that is what I'm trying to show here. But since we do have time, let me just jump back instead and then jump actually into the service to show you, because that is a lot more fun. So I was at a conference last month for aerial surveillance. And before that, I created a GPT for them on aerial surveillance. And so I had a few documents. I had already done some pre-prompting, and I thought, you know what, that's fun. Let's try to see if we can create a flow where we can make it answer different questions about aerial surveillance. So what I did here was that instead of only creating just the flow, I also went in and created a vector index. So here we have a vector index with the different files from this conference. And how do you actually do that? Well, you go into create. Of course, it has to get a name. It could have been aerial surveillance. It needs to be one word. And you need to choose a folder. And you need to be really careful about the files supported. So let me be straight and say I tried several. I would highly recommend going with PDF. But I here have my easy, and I had some cases, and I thought, okay, I'm going to upload those. We're going to try that. Of course, I've already done it, so you don't have to wait. Then we have to choose the vector store that we're going to do. I might be biased, but having tried several, I think this Ferris index is doing a very good job, so I would recommend choosing that. And then we say next, and we choose a connection to our OpenAI. And you can see that one's already there, but otherwise I could just do the drop down. And then it needs some compute, and it already recommends what you should choose. Once you've done that, you're ready to go next. And then it starts creating your vector index. Now, the first times that I did this, it didn't go as well as I thought it would. But if you just stick with PDFs, you're home safe. And then you can expand from there. And once I'd done that, I could go back to my flows. And now I had my vector index, and I could add it into my flow. So here I have a chat, and I have the questions that I can put in, and in a moment we can see the chat. And other than that, it's similar to the one we were running before. We have the answer coming in, we've chosen the model, and we've chosen how many tokens it should be using. And then, of course, I now also use my ADA model for embeddings. And we have the different strings of values that's coming here, and then it goes in and it's now searches. And here comes the great part, where now it goes in and it searches in the vector index that I have just created, and it actually almost found it's on its own. So that was very interesting. I didn't change the prompt context. This could have been done to improve it further, and it would be interesting to see in evaluations if this is what you need to do. Then we have the search question that comes out of the index that I have just created. And then it also can loop back over the chat history here. So I can ask back to the things that already came out. And it can keep answering, and it will still be the same OpenAI service and the same GPT-3 that I used to answer it. What does it look like then? Well, then suddenly over here, it can answer what is blue sky aerial survey. That is, of course, part of documents I put in. And it gives me a very nice answer that it is a company that provides aerial photography and data analysis services. And you could go in and just try straight off the board with ChatGPT and see if it can answer it, because that's a good tester of, was there any way this information was already in the model, or did it actually find this from the embeddings? So from the vector index and the embedding. And it did. And it also tells me that I use advanced technologies such as LIDAR and create 3D models. And then it even gives me a nice little source. And that is part of the PDFs that I uploaded to create my vector index. And then I ask it what cases they have. And here we can then say that they've done a case study where they help Derby homes boost solar energy output and reduce carbon emission. And this is indeed one of the cases that has been put in. So we can just give it another go and say, what other cases do you have from blue sky? Now, in an ideal world, I would have liked it to also give me this as links, but I'm still fairly happy with the fact that I got it working. If you had wanted to do this even faster, so maybe for me, this took at least an hour to get up and running. And so for comparison, I thought, okay, let me just see how fast I can do this in OpenAI. And here we can see, okay, it apologizes, it doesn't have further information. So for the fun of it and for comparison, I went over here in my OpenAI playground and I thought, okay, that's a different way of doing it. So here I did the same as when I created my GPT over in, well, ChatGPT. I've given it a longer message to prompt it before than I have in my flow. And then in addition, I've added your own data. Why do I show you this? Because if you're in a hurry and you want to compare it, then this is faster. Here you go in and you press add your own data. You upload the data the same way. You choose an index. You give the index a name. You can choose your strictness and you can choose how many documents it should be retrieved. And this works like a charm now. It didn't the first time I tried it, but it works like a charm now. And you can see that now it can actually over here give me slight more information. So it is able to give me several cases. For green roofs, for Gentian, it is also able to give me the UK cities. It has a link to the case study, so I can actually, if I'm very lucky, it should be able to open it. And then we have the Derby homes. So this is a good example of, in a very, very fast time, all the information that you might want, trying with your own data and using this comparison with, okay, what could get better in my prompt flow. So with 3 minutes, any questions or something else that you'd like to see?
Yeah, we have two questions actually. One is from Natalia. It's a long question, so I try to reading slowly. How does prompt flow in Azure Machine Learning Studio handles the data that is stored within tables? And are there any additional mechanism that should be in place to ensure that the data from the tables is being identified correctly, or maybe there is no difference whether the PDF files contain plain text or tables?
So so often you'd say it depends. So if you wanted to have data that was in a database format, so this could be like customer ID, their name, so forth, and what they've been buying, then it says in documentation you can load this up. And if you work with it quite a long time, you can, it is showing that you can, but it's not quick. You can't use the vector index. You actually have to load it in using several other libraries, and you have to actually use Visual Studio Code in order to do it. But it can understand the information like line by line. But if you're asking, can it understand all the logic of a table that is in a PDF document, then no. You would have to do a lot of additional work to make it understand that. So this is where there is a case from Siemens that was also shown at Ignite. And what they have done is that they then break the flow into several. So if the question is towards some of this very technical information, it has more modules to then understand just that part. And we can imagine that we could then be calling like document intelligence to fill out that and give that information in. Yet now I have been out asking this Friday at Microsoft, like, how do we handle this? And it seems that there are more people working to make this possible right now, but it's not that easy. It is one of the challenges, and it's a challenge that several customers are seeing. When I have the answer, Natalia, I know you will be the first to know. So great question.
Good. Perfect. Another question: how does Azure Machine Learning Prompt Flow support the deployment of a real-time endpoint that unlock the full power of LLMs for your applications?
So, I mean, we just did a very, very simple example here. But the whole point, once you've, I'm just going to show my screen one more time so we can see it easily. Once you go into your flow, got here, and you have your deployment here. Now, oh, I'm in the wrong spot. There we go. It is these endpoints that we want, where we have the models deployed. So here we have it for web classification. So imagine that we did want to have an app or a website that every time we threw a URL at it, it could tell us what kind of website it was. Well, then we would be able to use this this endpoint, and it would be live, and you could use it continuously. So this is what is possible by creating the deployment that gives us these endpoints, and that can be, implemented to websites, applications, and so forth live. And so in an ideal world, what we would like to have is, of course, that you can have your chat or prompt flow in an application, and you can ask different questions, and it's able to retrieve from multiple sources information and give you the correct technical answer.
Okay, amazing.
I have asked for more good examples than the Siemens case on this, but I think people are still working very hard on this, and we have to remember that the first part of prompt flows came in September. It didn't go GA until 15th of November, so it's not even a month.
Yeah,
it might be a bit of
yeah, makes sense. Okay, we have a text from Ben. I frequently run into the information in PDF tables as well, not easy to solve. If anyone has suggestions to solve or libraries to scrap the data better, I'm interested in knowing more.
Yeah. So from the research I have done and the work that I am currently doing, I'd say it seems to me that the different modules that you can use in LangChain might be most helpful. And then there is also a question of how do you split the information up? So can you actually sort of split it up that, okay, I read in PDF and I ask part of the index and to only understand everything that's text, then I ask another part to take, here is the things that are tables, but I still give it an ID so that when I search for this, I can get the information back and render it together. This is what I'm looking at. And I hope I will have maybe an article or something similar in the nearest future. But my best advice would be to go through LangChain.
Yeah,
That
and
seems
exactly. Yeah,
much
it's a new tech, new things is coming, and yeah. So step by step, we will have everything soon.
I hope so.
Yeah, so we can open the mic if you want. So if you have any questions, just shout out. We open the mic and you can ask your question directly from Emilie. Otherwise, we can still continue on chat. And oh yeah, we have a question here. How Azure Machine Learning Prompt Flow provides a visual presentation of the flow structure?
Well, so that's what we see on the right side. So if I would just share my screen one more time, if we go up here and we go back into our prompt flow, we take the easy example one more time. Then here on the right side, that's where we have the graph that shows it. And in addition, if we go in and we say evaluate, then we also can have some visual representation of the evaluation. And let's say that we had evaluated instead on the similarities of the vectors, then it can also give us a visual representation of how close they are together. So these are the examples of how it can show us visually, give us a visual representation. If we instead went in, let me see, my code space stopped. But if I just go in and take the long YAML files that a flow actually turns into, it looks very, very, very different. Yeah, I have one. I just very, very fast can show you for comparison, so you get an idea of what else could what could it look like. So over here, this could actually be the evaluation for groundedness if we were only using a notebook in Python notebook, then this is what we would get instead. And let me see if we can get one of those that gives us, how would it look if we were only doing the YAML? Yeah. So instead of having visual representations, a flow for YAML could look more similar to this. These are quite small, but this is what it would look like, and it gives us less an idea of, you know, where are we and what is running through and what inputs are running together. So I think it's easier to start with the visual representation.
Okay, amazing. And also they ask how to create the visual representation for monitor. And yeah.
That's an excellent question that I did not prepare. So once we have the endpoint and we go down and we have a look at it, let me see over here. So I didn't prepare this, so I don't think there is a nice visual representation, but I can tell you where you can see the monitoring. So we go here. So I go there, I've chosen my endpoints. And here you have the details, and then over here you have your monitoring, but I didn't set anything up. And I haven't been using it, so there isn't any metrics to see or, you know, visualize and consume. But this is where you would be finding the monitoring metrics.
Cool. Also, Ben said, what GitHub repositories should I take for good examples? Is there any more out there?
There are many. I think this time I was a bit surprised that they were harder to get up and running than what I expected. Normally, my first test is, oh, can I get it up and running in my code space? Then we're all good and it works. That was not as simple as I would like to have it be. But let me just hang on 1 second and I'll send you over a few of the links. So you know what, if you want to be very quick, go in, and then you can see my GitHub repo, and then you can see all the ones that I forked. Here we are. So if you go in, you find my profile, you will notice, if you look under my repository, you will find all the ones in the top that are especially relevant for prompt flow. So this one is not, but I think everything that is the top 5, 6 is the ones that I have found from the videos, the documentation, the different recommendations. I think the one called prompt flow here is probably the place to start. And if you want to learn the big version of, okay, how do I chat with my data? So this is the repo of what they showed at Ignite, then it's in here. My advice would be, do try out the different samples first over here in the Azure Machine Learning Service before you jump onto this. There is quite a pair of extra layers of difficulties added. Also, you need to use Cosmos DB, and you need to be very good with your YAML files, and you need to have several blob storages, and you need to create several indexes in your cognitive search. So, but that's the big one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we don't have any questions, and so I think we are kind of in end of the session. Thank you so much, Emilie. We learned a lot, and also personally, I will rewatch this session because there were a lot of information, and I need to work with different scenarios and also use the information that you shared with us. Thank you so much, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. And feel free to reach out on GitHub or LinkedIn if you have more questions. I'll answer them as best I can. Yes, I will throw in a link. Hang on 1 second, so that you can get that. So thank you so much, and I'm glad it was valuable. It was fun, but I can tell that it is very, very new and exciting. So let me see here. I can also, am I allowed to add something to the chat?
I think so.
During the meeting, it says only. Let me see if I can. Seems like I can't press it.
You're not able to send it?
No?
Yeah, it's okay.
No,
I can share with people. It's okay.
I'm pretending it's a question and I'm putting it to the Q&A.
Yeah. Cool.
So, but it should be in the Q&A so everybody can find it. Good. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. And we are continuing these kind of sessions until end of 2023, and also we also continue this plan on 2024. So everyone, you can enjoy the sessions that we have next year and next 2 weeks. So just join us and we can learn from each other. So perfect. Wish you a great day and night for some, and take care.